Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind, episode 109.
I really feel convicted and called to help them, to open their eyes and give them permission to lay down other people's expectations of what the education of your child looks like. You are the best expert for your child. No one knows them like you know them.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Diane Lockman. Diane takes a non-traditional approach to classical education. She believes the Greco-Roman and early Christian method was all about teaching 3 essential intellectual skills, not putting the child through a 12-year, 3-stage curriculum. She's passionate about equipping and encouraging bright homeschooling moms to teach those skills. That is, how to read, how to think, how to write, and how to speak effectively. Diane has written a book and loads of helpful blog posts, which you can find on her 4 different websites. Most recently, she launched an online group coaching program for moms who want help planning the homeschooling year. She is a past contributor to the Practical Homeschooling magazine and occasionally speaks at state, local, and virtual homeschooling conferences like Heart of the Matter Online and Indiana Association of Home Educators. She also teaches high school humanity classes to homeschool teens, English as a second language to Iraqi refugees, and reading comprehension to 3rd and 4th grade inner city girls. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's great to be here.
It will be really fun. She's got loads of information, so hopefully this is an information-packed podcast. So do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself and fill in any gaps that our bio didn't cover about you?
Yeah, I am a CPA by training. I was professional in the public accounting world for quite a few years. And then I had my children late in life. I was 12 years married before we had our first son, and he passed away as an infant, and that really rocked my world. I was pretty much in control of my own destiny as far as I thought things were going. And then when I lost him, it really changed everything for me. My husband and I said that if we were ever able to have healthy babies after that, I would stay home with them until they went to school. And it turns out that I ended up staying home with them the whole time because we ended up homeschooling them. So we were really blessed to have 2 healthy babies after my son died. And they're now, one of them's already graduated from college and one is a junior in college. And since they have gone on and graduated, I've turned my attention to helping other moms who are still on the journey to homeschool their kids and to just relax and enjoy the journey because it goes by so quickly.
Yeah, I think we take that for granted too many times. So,
well, we get really bogged down in the details of the day and the stresses, and one of the things I love to do is help moms catch a long vision so that they see the things that are really crucial that they need to focus on and don't worry about the little things that are more like ankle biters.
Yeah, the small little annoyances, not the big stuff. So
yeah,
that's great. Do you want to go ahead and tell our audience a little bit more about your educational philosophy? In your bio, we read that a non-traditional approach to classical education and the Greco-Roman, did I say that correctly?
Yep.
Greco-Roman and early Christian method and what that's all about. Those 3.
Yeah, I loved it. I would love to share that. My own personal education was in the public school system in Tennessee. So I went through a normal 12-year program there and loved pretending I was a school teacher when I was a little kid. My best friend and I would play in the basement. We would set up a schoolroom, the chalkboard and the desks and all that stuff. So my whole understanding of education when I came to homeschooling was basically what I had been through myself, which was public school. And I encountered this idea of classical education kind of by accident, although I would say it probably wasn't really by accident, but I thought it was by accident at the time. Ran into it at the library and started reading about it, and I said, wow, this is exciting. I really want to do this. But I started to try to do this 12-year, 3-stage philosophy, which is this idea that you've probably heard of, which is like 4 years of grammar, and then 3 years or 4 years of logic, and then 4 years of rhetoric. And the kid moves through these chronological stages in this educational paradigm. I tried to do that with my kids, and I was a type A kind of mom who would try to do it, as best as I could. And I got so frustrated, and my kids were hating it. And things weren't working the way that this particular philosophy of education was working. And so I said, I really want to understand what a real classical education looked like, because what I'm hearing from the contemporary people that's classical is just not working. It's not really giving my family what I think that they're promising. And so I started doing a little bit of research on my own, and my husband's really the one that encouraged me to really dig deep into it. And I couldn't find a lot of information from educators about what an authentic classical education was, or how they came up with this idea of what it was. And so I decided I would go back to the actual histories in this Greco-Roman world, which would be the Roman Republic and back, before Jesus was born, and the Greek histories before the Roman Republic, and try to trace it back to how it originally was, and then follow it through all the way up until ancient Christian times, and then medieval times, and then up to, the colonial times and all that. So I started reading a lot of old Roman histories, Greek histories, and just reading what an actual tutor, a master, would have done with his apprentice. And I followed that through all the way into early Christian writings and the early church writings, and discovered that what a real classical education was not about these 3 stages over 12 years that I was being told was classical. But what a real classical education was just about teaching these 3 essential skills, these intellectual skills of mastering the language so that you could reason critically, so that you could communicate effectively. And the master and the apprentice would work one-on-one, and there would be a lot of dialogue and a lot of memorization, a lot of reading of classics and discussing those classics. So that's what I decided I wanted to do with my own kids. So we chucked the what I call the new classical method, which is where you kind of squeeze a classical education into a 12-year public school paradigm. We chucked that, and I said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to focus on skills. And then I said, well, okay, how do I take these broad skills, these skills of grammar and logic and rhetoric, or reading skills or thinking skills or writing/speaking skills? How do I take those skills and come up with a system so that I can teach it? And I just sort of started brainstorming, okay, within each of those major skills, what were the little skills that I wanted my own kids to master, that I wanted them to achieve, so that I knew when they got there that we could move on. And I broke it up into this checklist. So I've got these, what I call roadmaps, since it's a journey that you follow. So I've got a reading checklist, and I've got a critical thinking checklist, and I've got a communications checklist that I use with my own kids, and I now share it with my moms that are working with me online. And I also ran into a book called The 7 Laws of Teaching, which was written in the mid-1800s by a guy named John Milton Gregory. And he helped me understand some of the classical teaching methods, and he helped to give me a scale so that I could actually measure those skills from no knowledge to changed behavior. So we started incorporating skills in our homeschool instead of subjects. And then by the time we got to the high school years, we had to start incorporating subjects in order to create that transcript that the college admissions officers would want. So I was able to kind of tailor that high school subject-driven curriculum so that it was really attractive to the college admissions officers, but also meeting the needs of my own kids.
Well, and didn't you find, too, that after you've done, those intellectual skills, that maybe they were ready to have it split up by subjects? Is that kind of what you found, or was that still a difficult process?
Yeah, they were. We actually, when you teach skills, you can actually accelerate the education, because when you master a certain skill, like let's say you're working on English grammar and you've mastered the 8 parts of speech, or you've mastered diagramming, or you've mastered any of the little sub skills within that, then you can move on. So you don't spend like a whole school year drilling on something that they already know, which is what kind of kills the love of learning and kind of makes it so boring, is when you just beat, a dead horse, you're just going over and over and over it again, because the subject in a public school says, you start in the fall and you finish it in the spring, and you feel bad if you don't finish it in the spring because you didn't finish the curriculum. You feel really guilty and all. So instead of doing that, we just work on a skill as soon as you've mastered it. And when I say mastered it, what I mean is that your behavior is changed, or you can actually teach someone else how to do it. So, if my kids learned their 8 parts of speech and they knew them so well that they could teach them to me and continue, I'll check back with them every now and then to make sure they still got that and retained that information. We moved on. So the education was actually accelerated, and my kids could start on high school subjects earlier than maybe some of their peers could.
Wow. It sounds really succinct too. Like it's just simple and it's just like working. How did your children, how did they accept this, I guess? Did they take it really well?
Oh, yeah. They were so happy to get rid of the grammar drills. Yeah, that was like, okay, good, Mom. We're so happy to. Plus, you can be a lot more creative when you're teaching skills. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned over the years is that I could pay attention and be alert to my children's learning styles and their preferences, their personality preferences, and their interests and natural gifts and talents. And really, you can choose from a whole smorgasbord of ways to learn or subjects to learn about, topics to learn about, and still be teaching the skills. So whereas, one kid might enjoy, aircraft or something, it's aircrafts or something, the other kid might enjoy, decoupage, and you can still teach the same skills. It's just that the kid's getting to do something that they're interested in, and it's not like you're locked in with particular curriculum or a textbook or anything like that. Now, I did use textbooks, but I used them for my sake. So like I counsel a lot of moms, coach a lot of moms now who are still really insecure without a textbook or without a workbook. And I say, that's okay. You can use those. You can keep them, but use them as your teaching resource. Don't be a slave to the curriculum. So you can use the table of contents and pull those exercises out if you want, if there's a certain skill you're working on that your kid hasn't mastered yet. But don't tell yourself that, I've got to get through 36 chapters of this textbook or we are a failure. Because that's not the way that an authentic classical education was done. And for almost 3,000 years, that authentic classical education was really very effective at raising people who could master the English language or their Greek language or their Roman language, so that they could reason critically, so that they could communicate effectively. And that's really what I wanted to do with my kids, was raise a kid who was a thinker, who could communicate what they were thinking and not be swayed by other thinkers because they were, not capable.
Yeah, that sounds great. So to reemphasize kind of how your paradigm about education changed, I mean, through all your research and your experience and stuff, how do you feel like that was very unique for you in changing that paradigm of what you thought about education?
Oh, it was huge. It was like a tidal wave. The shift was huge. Because like I said, I was raised in a public school where we did, a certain curriculum. Like I was still doing English grammar in high school. I don't know if you did in high school or not, but we were still doing English grammar in high school. And I loved grammar. I loved diagramming and all that stuff. But why were we wasting time on that in 10th and 11th grade?
Yeah, just repeat after repeat.
Yeah, then I could have been learning other things that I didn't learn. So at first, when I first came to this realization, it wasn't like a one day, there was a change and all. It kind of happened gradually as I did more and more reading and read the actual histories and the actual biographies and found out how they really educated. It was really over time that I began to say, wow, this is a profound change. It's a huge paradigm shift. And it's sort of scary because you don't know if it's going to work. But you think it's going to work because you've got 3,000 years worth of history behind you that says that, like the U.S. founders were trained this way, that Jesus used this method too, when he was teaching through parables and working with a small group of disciples. The Apostle Paul used classical methods when he's preaching. I mean, there's lots of evidence you can find that it's effective, but also you're like one of the only ones in the homeschool community that's doing this, and you're like, oh gosh, I hope this works. So, and I can say now that it did work. I mean, my daughter, who just graduated from college, is on her way to the London School of Economics. She's going to work on a master's degree in, political theory. And my kids, they're both doing very well. And I've worked with lots of kids who are now doing things that are very exciting. And it's because they have the skills that classical education affords for them.
Yeah, but like you said, it is a different classical type education I've ever heard about before. So do you feel like that was your biggest challenge, is just trying to shift your own paradigm, or were there other challenges that you had along the way, and what did you learn from those challenges?
Well, one of my challenges is because I felt like I needed to share this information. My husband was really, really pushing me. He was like, "You've got to share this information with other moms. And it's not, you've got to do it." And I was like, "Not yet. I'm still trying to homeschool. I don't have time right now." And he's like, "No, you really need to." And so that's why I wrote my first book in the middle of all this, which was kind of like my home was the laboratory and my kids were the lab rats that I was, trying this stuff out on, and I was sharing it with other moms and all. But one of my biggest challenges, I think, was moms who came to the homeschooling table wanting classical, but not really checking it out themselves. And I think I got frustrated, with that, because they just accepted this other new classical paradigm as gospel truth when it really hasn't ever been proven or even worked out in real life. So, and a lot of moms were frustrated with it, with this new method. And I'm trying to encourage them to, let go of that new method and try this other method. And sometimes it's kind of scary. So that's one of my big challenges, is I feel like I'm one of these little fish pushing against a big, huge stream of other fish that are going the other direction, that are all saying, go this way. And I'm saying, wait, try this. It's more relaxing. It's going to give you freedom to be creative. And so what I'm looking for are moms who are willing to relax and be more creative and not be so stuck in what the public school paradigm is. Because honestly, the public school paradigm has only been around in this country, in the U.S., since the late 1800s. And the reason it was established in the first place is because the educators wanted to control the public. I mean, and you see what's going on in the public schools now. So why would we, who are rebellious, who have said, no, we're going to educate our kids at home, why would we buy into that same system that, that we're trying to leave? So anyway, I don't mean to preach about it, but, we need to just kind of relax sometimes and pay attention to our kids. There's lots of clues in our story and in our kids' lives that we can pay attention to that will help us teach these skills so they'll be equipped. Because if they're not kids who grow up into young adults who know how to think clearly and know how to communicate effectively, then they're going to be influenced by people who do. And people who have the ideas are the ones that control the culture. And I can speak to this really strongly because my kids one of them was in a secular school, and the things that they came home and told me about that were being taught in those schools by smart people will just send chills down your spine. Yeah. So I want to help moms raise kids who can think so that they can hear those arguments and say, what? No way, or, in a winsome way, say, I beg to disagree. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Because otherwise, they're just going to be, influenced by the people who have the ideas. And so I wanted to raise kids who have the ideas and can talk about them. Well,
and I love how one of the challenges is that mothers were coming to you uneducated about it. I mean, how do you think that affects, I can just see your children being a little more, because you've done the research and stuff, that they are also seeking that out. I mean, how does a mother that actually goes and researches this out helping her children by doing that?
Well, I think that here's one of the issues is not every mother has the time or the luxury or the leisure time to actually research it out herself. Certainly, I would hope that she takes the time to read the things or research the things that she feels, called to go read about. But I also recognize that I only had 2 children at the time, so I had more time to actually look into all this. And moms who have multiple kids, they're busy. They don't have a lot of time. So pick and choose what you want to research. So if you want to go back and look into, Greco-Roman history, by all means, I've got lots of suggestions on what you should read. But if not, that's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing is I just really want to help educate the moms. So I'm kind of like teacher training for the moms.
Yeah.
I really feel convicted and called to help them, to open their eyes and give them permission to lay down other people's expectations of what the education of your child looks like. You are the best expert for your child. No one knows them like you know them. You know their strengths, you know their weaknesses, you know where they're lazy or where they're really sharp. You know all that, and you just got to trust that you've got their best interests at heart. And if you teach these skills, you're going to get there. And I help my moms plan the high school years so that they have that transcript that is extremely appealing to the college administrators and equips that child for, whatever that future is going to be, whether it's college or something else.
Before we go on, let us take a minute and hear about our sponsors. Changing a paradigm takes some study, but like me, you are probably super busy. That's why we've teamed up with Audible. Go to our website, theluminousmind.net, get a free month of Audible with 2 audiobooks, thousands of titles in exchange for only books that you absolutely love. You too can be learning on the go to keep that fire burning. Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Diane Lockman and inspiring classical scholars. So let's kind of move on to your mission then and talk about the inspiration behind, your writing and your blogs and then your podcasts. I became a recent fan of your podcast, so I definitely want you to talk about all those different things. And now we talked about there being 4 different websites that you have. Do you want to kind of go through those 4 websites and discuss each thing, something different that the parents can get off of each one of those websites?
Right. Well, the first website, the primary website is ClassicalScholar.com, and that's really more like a portal, and that's the first place I would suggest you go because you'll find a lot of information there. Like, for instance, if your moms want to learn about classical education, all they got to do is go to classicalscholar.com/classical-education, and there's a whole page, a whole resource page. If they want to go learn about the skills, the same thing. All they got to do is go to that same website /teaching strategies. So there's a lot of information on that website to help educate them if they don't have time to go do the reading themselves. And by the way, I've got a lot of links on those pages to the actual books, like the histories that they can go read if they want to do that. So the Classical Scholar is not that I'm a classical scholar. My kids are always laughing about this because I never, ever felt like I was a classical scholar. I'm becoming one, I guess, but I was never the one. The whole dream for that name was that my kids would become classical scholars and that I would raise up other kids through my moms who are classical scholars, So it was this idea of raising the next generation. Anyway, Classical Scholar ClassicalScholar.com has 3 main portals that you can go to. The first one is Mom's Course. That's the second website. momscourse.com. Mom's Course is a homeschool planning course that's online that equips a mom from the core vision, from her strategic vision and her family mission statement, all the way through to planning and executing a school semester. So it's a membership site where she joins and she becomes a member for life. I walk her through the core values to the planning tools to the teaching strategies, and these are classical teaching strategies like Socratic method and inductive research and things like that. And then all the way to school records and the documents that you need to keep. And then she can come back every single semester and redo it again. So she's updating the plan every semester and planning out a semester at a time to teach these skills. And this is kind of born out of moms who I was coaching in the early days who said, well, this sounds great, but how do I do it? So I said, well, I'm going to come up with a safe place for moms to go where they can learn how to do it, where they can have like their own teacher training and they can learn how to do it and they can come back and talk to me and they've got access to me. I do monthly coaching calls and if you want, more than monthly, we can do that too. So it's quite a personal experience in a relationship that they have with me as a coach. So that's the second website is momscourse.com. And then the third website is classicalcourses.com. And you can go to learn.classicalcourses.com to see the high school course that I'm teaching right now. And my specialty is writing and public speaking and histories and Bible studies and those kind of humanities. I think you mentioned that in the bio. So that's what I want to do with the high school courses is I've got moms who have been following me and they have said, we're busy, we have all these other kids, different ages, and we want to give our kids this high school classical education, but we don't have the time to do it or the resources, or we want to source it to you. And so I have come up with these, basically a lot of them are the courses that I taught my own kids. So that's the third website is high school courses that you can take through me if you want to do that. And You can preview some of the lessons there if you go to that learn.classicalcourses.com and see, kind of getting a feel for what it's like. And then the fourth website is just triviummastery.com, and that's where my book is.
Great. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to write all this down while you're talking about it. In fact, I'll need to get that link of high school. You mentioned it's learn.classicalcourses.com. Okay.
If you go to ClassicalScholar.com, on the very first row, you'll see a big blue button that says Enroll High School. And if you click on that, it'll take you right there.
Do you have any words on your podcast?
Yeah, I'd love to share about that. Okay, so recently, one of the things in my coaching course for moms that I have realized is that there are moms who would love to have some lesson plans. You know, if they're not going to be tied to a curriculum or to a workbook or something, then they feel like, well, I need to know how this works. Okay, I can embrace the philosophy of education, of classical education, but how do I actually do it on the ground? And so what I did was I decided that I would put together what I call the 5-minute homeschool lesson plan podcast. And what it is somewhere around 5 minutes, sometimes 6 minutes. I get a little carried away. I know. It's a podcast where within 5 minutes, let's say, I lay out a complete done-for-you lesson plan that's going to teach one of the skills in a creative way. So, like, for instance, the most recent one that you might find on there is one on teaching slope with coordinate geometry. And it's a problem-solving skill that you're teaching, and it's something that you could use in this lesson plan to supplement your math curriculum. And, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this. Of all the different rules that I mentioned, you know, about teaching skills and getting freed up from curriculum and all, math is the one exception. You don't want to free up from the math curriculum because math is a serial skill. That means that it continues to cycle over the years, and if you skip a math curriculum, you're going to have some holes. And that's one area that I really highly recommend that you follow from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade is a good math curriculum. So
great. Well, and I love your podcast because not only do they teach essential skills in a very quick, concise way, they also are very inspirational. So thanks for expanding on that.
If you go to the show notes for the podcast, not only do you listen to the podcast and hear me, teach you how to teach it, but in the show notes, you'll actually find the lesson plan that's typed out for you. So all you have to do is print it out. It's got your supplies on it. It's got the steps that you're going to take. So it's almost like a script that you can use. And, of course, you can tailor it to your own needs. So you don't have to do, exactly what I have on there.
Yeah, it's great. So it sounds like you can pretty much access every one of these portals from ClassicalScholar.com?
Yeah.
Great. That's wonderful. It sounds like, you have done the research. It sounds amazing that you've done all this and put this together for moms. So what successes have you seen when you have families and mothers that, have used this, I guess it's an ideology that you've created? Yeah. It's not really your creation, I guess, but stuff that you've learned.
Yeah, I'm just interpreting an old idea. It's basically a new way of thinking about an old idea, I guess. It's really exciting. The moms that have gone through my course or have been coached with me, they've got this, it's almost like a light bulb goes on, and they all of a sudden expel this breath of, gosh, this makes total sense about teaching skills, and I feel so relieved that I don't have to teach all these subjects every day, and it doesn't feel like a burden anymore. So, for instance, I'm working with one family right now, and actually the husband is part of the coaching, which is exciting. My real intention was only to work with the moms, but he's actually the one that's primarily working with their sons right now because their mom is also employed. So I work with some moms who are work-at-home moms and some actually that work out of the home. And so he's a chef, so his hours are, nighttime hours, and so he's actually going through the coaching with me and with his wife. So we've all three been working together, and they're having some real fireworks go off as they're starting to think about this and execute it in their home. So that's very exciting. And then I have one really good friend who started following me in reading, and I can't take all the credit for this, but she began to give her son a classical education at home, and he's now at Johns Hopkins studying medicine.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, another friend whose son went to MIT and studied engineering there. So another young woman that I helped work with on her public speaking skills just graduated from University of Virginia Law School, and she's going to be actually working with Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia.
Oh, my goodness.
I can't, of course, I can't take credit for all those kids because their moms are the ones that are the final authority. They're down there in the trenches working every day. But I hope that I've inspired their moms and given them some, ideas for teaching a little more creatively and not being tied down to what other people say they need to do.
Yeah. Well, mentorship makes a big difference in seeing those children. And obviously, those children are moving into, fields that they love because they've had a good mentor of their mother and you've mentored her. Was there any mentors that you had along the way that made a significance in your success?
I think my mentors are all dead. It would be those classics that I read. There are a few mentors that are still alive, like Os Guinness and Louise Cowan. They wrote a book that is called Invitation to the Classics. And it's an anthology of all these Western classics that have been written since the beginning until now. And I really felt like I was mentored by them as I read through that book and decided which classics I wanted to work on in my own home. So that was good. That's an adult book. That's not a kid book that you're going to teach. You're not going to give that to your child to read. But they mentored me even though they don't know me. And some of these ancient Romans and Greeks that I read, they mentored me as I read about how the Roman Republic was established. Like, for instance, there's a guy named Polybius who wrote about the Roman Republic. And I was shocked at how much the U.S. government is patterned after the Roman Republic. I was just shocked. I was reading about how they did it, before Jesus was born. And I'm thinking, my word, the American founders, they knew this. They were trained in this. They were classical scholars themselves because they had this kind of education and they knew this and they patterned our own government about it. So I feel like those kind of, like I said, the dead people mentored me. And then John Milton Gregory, the guy that I mentioned who wrote the 7 Laws of Teaching, he mentored me. So yeah, it's just been, I think that's what happens when you read classic literature or classic biographies or histories is there's a collaboration that goes on because even though the author is gone, his writing lives on in your heart and mind and it changes you. And so that's, those are really the people that have mentored me. And I'm always open to new ideas. I love learning. I never stop learning. I'm always reading and trying to, refine my understanding and interpretation of classical so that I can be a better coach to my moms.
That is wonderful. It's an inspiration to me, so they're definitely influencing me. So speaking of books,
yeah.
I want to talk about, we talked about some of the books that were influential for you, and I noticed on your website that you have a pretty extensive bookshop by age. Do you want to kind of talk about that and maybe share a few of your favorites?
Yeah, when I first started my blogs, the first thing a lot of moms would ask me is, what books do you recommend for certain ages? And I kept a running book list when my kids were at home as we were reading a book. Every single time we went to the library and we finished a book, I wrote it down on a piece of lined notebook paper. So if you go back to my files, maybe, your listeners may not be this detailed, but I just wanted to keep an anthology, a record of what we had done. So I kept this running list of all the books we had read. And, it also brings me joy just to look at some of those books. But I couldn't go through all that list with my moms and try to call it all out. So what I decided to do was create these 6 Amazon stores by age and put my favorite books on there. So instead of me, writing an email every time when a mom asked me about it, I just send them to that store and say, these are my favorite books. These are the books that worked for us. So go check these out. And one thing that I would suggest, too, is that your moms get a teaching resource that's written by Gladys Hunt. Now, your listeners might already be familiar with her, but she writes a book called Honey for a Child's Heart. And she's got another one called Honey for a Teen's Heart. And she gives these little brief synopses of the different books that she recommends. And these are books that are going to really nurture your children and your teens. And teen books are fairly safe. A lot of young adult books out there I wouldn't even suggest my kids read. But I trust Gladys Hunt, and so that might be a resource that they might want to pick up next time they're at convention is the Gladys Hunt books.
Those are awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So do you have any long-term goals? And then what do you hope your legacy is that you hope to leave behind?
Well, I actually have started thinking about that because I'm on the other side of 50. And my kids, I don't know if my kids are going to homeschool or not because neither one of them have, they aren't in relationships yet. So I don't know what the future is there. But I definitely want to spend the next, few decades, as long as the Lord gives me, nurturing and encouraging my moms And I want to continue to just almost do a brain dump of everything that I have learned and am continuing to learn, and put it out there on the internet for her as a resource so that she can, make it better in her own home. So that's my real mission, is to encourage moms and to basically just say, look, you can do this. It's not beyond your capabilities. You can definitely do this if you're just paying attention to your kids, be alert to the signs, capture a vision of your family story and who your kids are uniquely equipped to be, and you can do this. So that's my plan, is to continue to just keep writing and keep coaching and encouraging. And Lord willing, I'll be here for 30 more years.
Well, and what a better way to teach what you know. I mean, to pass that along is to teach what you know, to spread that around and make that live forever. Wonderful. Yeah. So do you have any final parting words of advice? And then before we say goodbye, do you want to go ahead and give us your contact information so that we can get in touch with you?
Yeah. You can always reach me by email. If you just email Diane at ClassicalScholar.com, and that's all lowercase, I'll get it. And I'll try to turn those email responses around within 24 hours. So you're welcome to contact me that way. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me. You could also go to any of those websites and you'll find a contact form at the bottom of the page that you can use, and that'll come directly to me as well. Or if you are interested in Skyping me, my Skype name is Diane.Lockman, and that's all lowercase. So, you can find me on Facebook, Google, Twitter, all that too, and you can find all that on my websites if you'd like. But the last thing I would like to say is, if you just keep your minds on this big picture goal, and that is the classical ideal of bringing a child to mastery of those three skills. The three skills, that, as they called them, were the grammar skills, the logic skills, and the rhetoric skills. And the grammar skills would be the skills that involve reading, spelling, punctuation, capitalization, all that. The critical thinking skills are the logic skills, so that those are problem-solving skills like the math and the scientific method, argumentation, which would be, learning how to set up an argument, pros and cons and all. Literary analysis, that would all fall within critical thinking skills. And then the third skill set would be the rhetoric skills. And of course, these days, it's not just about becoming a good orator, which is what they did back then, but also a good writer. So the writing and speaking skills. If you just keep that big picture in mind, that your goal in teaching the skills, in educating your kids over the next 12 years or 8 years or how many you have left, is to raise an educated child. And that would be a child who knows how to use their native language to reason critically, to communicate effectively. If you raise a child who has mastered their language so that they can think critically and communicate effectively, then they will have the ideas that are going to drive culture. They'll have a platform to influence people, whoever those people are, whether it's people in their workplace, people in their church, in their neighborhood, or maybe even a bigger stage, like this young lady who's going to be working with Antonin Scalia. I don't know what their calling is. It might be a small calling in a small community. It might be a global stage. Who knows? But if you just equip them with those skills, then they'll be able to learn anything. There's nothing that they can't learn if they have those skills, and they'll have a desire, a hunger to learn. And I've seen that in my own kids, that they're lifelong learners. And I've seen that in the kids that I've had in my high school courses and the kids of my moms that I coach. And it really is an effective paradigm for education, this authentic classical model of education. And it's really quite simple. It's just about teaching skills so that they can, pursue the interests that really make them excited and happy later in life.
That is wonderful. Well, and what was coming to my mind as you were talking is, sometimes as we homeschool, we worry about holes in their education. But when they have the desire and the love to learn, there is no holes, that they'll continue to be seeking those things out and will fill those holes themselves. So.
Yeah, because actually what you've done, if you give them those skills, is you've given them the tools that they need to go learn, fill in those holes if they find there are holes later.
Yeah.
Because honestly, you can't teach them everything. You can't teach every single piece of knowledge. So, why would you even try? You need to give them the essential intellectual skills so that they have the ability later to fill in the gaps when they need to. And there's only, the best time to learn something is when you really need to learn it,
Yeah.
It's when you have a desire to learn it that, the learning becomes something, and the knowledge becomes something that you want to go after. So if you've given them the skills to do the research, to do the critical thinking, to do the writing, to do the, the reading, whatever, read closely so that they can research and they can write about it, then they can figure it all out. And, you will have done your job and you'll be happy because you've got a classical scholar.
That is wonderful. Well, thank you so much. You've been a huge inspiration to me, and I'm sure our listeners are also been very inspired by you. So thanks so much for joining us.
You're so welcome, Rebecca. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Diane Lockman, go to our show notes at theluminousmind.net. Be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list and consider joining our program by going to the scheduling tab to become a fire starter today. Help support the podcast by making all your Amazon purchases through the free Amazon widget on our website. Also, sign up to receive 2 free audiobooks from Audible at theluminousmind.net. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Google+, and now Pinterest. Get our audio content by subscribing on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. To help us grow, consider telling your friends about us. Leave us a review. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.